Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Vortex. I'm your host Troy, and in today's video we're breaking down episode 8 of WandaVision, the penultimate episode of the series. This episode took a slightly different angle compared to the usual WandaVision episodes we've seen so far, but provided a great deal of a backstory, and in the process setting up the big finale, which is now just a week away. So, as always, I'm going to break down this episode, give my thoughts and reviews of it, and then finally give some theories for the big finale next week. So without any further ado, let's get right into the breakdown. The episode begins by giving us a small amount of background towards the character of Agatha Harkness, who was revealed at the end of episode 7 to be responsible for some of the key events of this series, including Pietro turning up at Wanda's door and the death of Sparky. It goes all the way back to 1693 in Salem, a place in Massachusetts that is typically associated with witches and witch covens. And it seems as though Agatha is being taken by her coven to be presumably killed after using magic that should have been forbidden for her age and skill level. Agatha tries to play coy and acts as though she doesn't know what the witches are talking about, but when she's asked to drop the act, she replies, "I didn't break your rules, they simply bend to my power," giving us a very clear indication that Agatha is more than your typical witch. The witches ignore this and still attempts to kill her, but finds that Agatha winds up absorbing their power instead and draining the life force out of all of the witches surrounding her. And you can see this quite clearly once they stop casting their spells on Agatha, because we see lifeless husks hit the floor that look more like skeletons than they do people. And even killing the mother of the coven with a little bit more effort, taking the brooch as a symbol of her superiority. Fast forward to present day, and we are now picking up where we left off at the end of episode 7. Wanda makes an attempt to read Agatha's mind to try and ascertain what she wants from her, but realizes she is unable to read Agatha's mind, and additionally is unable to use any of her basic spells and magic inside of this basement, because Agatha has casted some runes around them that prevents anybody but Agatha from using their spells. Agatha shows off a few basic spells such as transmutation to Wanda, but then makes it very clear that those spells took her years and years of practice to master. But now that she's come face to face with Wanda's abilities, she wants to know how exactly she was able to create this hex, control everybody within it, even people on the outskirts, without even thinking, and also manage to hold it for as long as she has. In the process confirming that Pietro was under her control, but not confirming where Pietro actually came from. Instead, she simply says that she was his eyes and mouth. Wanda then reaffirms the same thing she said right the way through the season, in that she doesn't know how the hex was initially formed, but Agatha does not believe her, instead choosing to throw her around a bit, and then decide to take Wanda on a trip down memory lane. Because this episode finally gives Wanda a proper, solid backstory beyond what she said to Ultron in Avengers Age of Ultron. And so our first stop on the memory lane tour is Sokovia, before her parents were killed. In fact, this is set on the night in which her parents die and the bomb hits their apartment. She sees Wanda's mother open up a suitcase full of different DVDs, all matching sitcoms that episodes of WandaVision have been based on, such as Bewitched and Malcolm in the Middle. Wanda is asked to pick out a particular DVD to watch on TV night, and she picks out the Dick Van Dyke Show, and in doing this explains why exactly WandaVision has so much of a sitcom influence in its episodes. Because as a child, Wanda watched a lot of different sitcoms, and all of them were ingrained in her brain as a very prominent childhood memory right before her parents were killed, because speaking of which, while they're watching, the first bomb hits the apartment and everything fades to black, and we don't see Wanda's mother or father again. She does find her brother, however, and the two children hide under the bed while the gunfire outside continues, right before the second bomb bearing the Stark logo lands in front of them but doesn't explode. Agatha pulls Wanda out of this flashback, believing this to be the point where Wanda discovered her powers, but Wanda explains that she didn't use any kind of spell here, she simply waited for them to be rescued, and so unsatisfied, Agatha opens the next door to a later point in Wanda's life, her experimentation as part of Hydra, giving us the chance to actually see the moment where Wanda gained her abilities. Hydra lock Wanda inside the same room as Loki's scepter, and when she tries to approach it, she sees the gem inside the scepter fly out, come towards her face, and as she touches it, it explodes, revealing the Mind Stone within, giving Wanda her powers, and in the process giving her a vision of her future Scarlet Witch appearance. A Scarlet Witch appearance that we haven't yet seen because we only saw a silhouette, but her iconic headpiece was a part of it, something that she's only worn as a joke in the Halloween episode so far in the MCU, which gives me the clear indication that she might be getting an update to her outfit at the end of this show, or maybe in Doctor Strange 2, and the headpiece might be a part of it. But back on topic, one thing I loved about this scene was that Wanda's theme from the credits of every episode began to play as this vision transpired. It's the first time we've actually heard that theme in anything other than the credits, and it is a beautiful piece of music by Christoph Beck, and I'm really glad to see them using it in the actual episode itself now. After the experiment, Wanda is locked away in a room and is left watching sitcoms yet again, showing her that these are her escape for all of the trauma she's been experiencing in her life. Some Hydra scientists do attempts to actually watch back the camera footage and figure out what happened in that cell, but interestingly enough, the footage jump cuts from before the stone flies out of the scepter to afterwards when Wanda is just lying on the floor, so they're unable to watch what actually happened, much like when the sitcom was filtered when Sword were watching it, meaning they were unable to see key events such as when Wanda was using her powers. At this point now, Agatha says to Wanda that she believed she had some inbuilt ability to become a witch at some point in her life, but it was an ability that would have faded away if the Infinity Stone hadn't unleashed it from within her, crediting the trauma and the combination of the stone together for giving her Scarlet Witch powers. But now we jump forward yet again to another flashback scene. This one is set in the Avengers compound shortly before the events of Captain America Civil War. Wanda is now living in the Avengers compound, Ultron has been defeated, and Pietro is dead. Wanda is once again left feeling alone, watching these sitcoms to try and process the trauma, or just generally, to be honest, ignore it. When Vision interrupts her, sits down with her, and tries to assess how she's doing. He does his best to try and reassure Wanda and make her feel better, but she just wants Pietro back, and nothing is really changing that. Vision then tries to argue that grief can not only be made up of sorrow, and then says that while he hasn't lost a loved one himself, and so doesn't share the same experience that Wanda has, he then asks Wanda what is grief if not love persevering. Which seriously is just a fantastic quote. That is a beautiful way to word it, and I really liked that. And clearly Wanda did too, because the pair begin to bond over the sitcom, with Vision laughing at some of the jokes within the show. But Agatha is still not happy, and she pushes Wanda just that little bit more, giving us one final flashback scene, the longest one and also the best. Because now we finally get the real story as to how Wanda got Vision back. For those of you that do need a reminder, in a previous episode of the show, Tyler explains to Jimmy, Monica and Darcy that Wanda had broken into S.W.O.R.D. while they were trying to work on Vision's corpse, stolen the body and reanimated him, pinning everything on Wanda, making her the sole culprit of everything, probably to help fuel his relentless campaign against Wanda to try and make her the bad guy in every situation. But as we find out now in this episode, all of that was a lie. First off, Wanda did not break into S.W.O.R.D. in the way that Tyler had suggested, rather she turned up at the base and asked politely to see Vision's body, but didn't even want to reanimate him, she just wanted his body so she could bury him. At which point Tyler invites her into S.W.O.R.D. to his office for them to have a discussion. Wanda asks Tyler to promise her that she can have Vision's body, but he ignores her request, instead opting to show Wanda what exactly they've been doing with Vision's body all this time. And so we get to see close up, not just on a security camera, what exactly they're doing to Vision. His body's been split into pieces, they're trying to open up parts of him, analyze him in an attempt to bring him back online. Tyler doesn't tell Wanda that they're trying to bring him back online, because as we found out in episode 7 when Jimmy was reading the Cataract file, Tyler was keeping his intentions to revive Vision completely secret, so very few people at S.W.O.R.D. actually knew that that was his plan. He tries to say to Wanda that S.W.O.R.D. have a legal and ethical obligation to dismantle Vision, referring to him as a sentient weapon rather than a person. He says to Wanda that she is not going to be able to take his body to revive him, at which point Wanda looks very confused. Tyler has jumped to the conclusion that Wanda wants to revive Vision rather than just bury him, and as we see from Wanda's reaction, that was not her plan. He simply put that idea in her head now. She doesn't even believe she has the ability to do that, but it doesn't matter either way, because Tyler closes off the conversation by saying she will not be allowed to bury $3 billion worth of vibranium into the ground, twisting the knife in even further by reinforcing that Vision is not hers. At which point Wanda breaks the glass overlooking the area where Vision is being worked on and flies down to his body. The guards even put their guns down that they were aiming at Wanda when Tyler asks them to let her approach the body. Referencing Infinity War, where the two of them said to each other they could only feel each other, Wanda tries to read Vision's mind and simply says, "I can't feel you." It's not even the finale and they already have me crying. But instead of stealing Vision's body in the way that Tyler had suggested she had to Monica, Jimmy and Darcy, once Wanda says that quote, she just leaves S.W.O.R.D. She just walks away. Wanda then gets back in her car, staring briefly over at an open envelope on the opposite car seat, before driving off to New Jersey to visit Westview, giving us the context as to why this town was picked for this show to begin with. Because Wanda approaches an empty plot of land, pulls the envelope out of her pocket, and reveals that Vision had bought the deeds to this plot of land for them to live together as a family, showing to us that she wanted Vision's body so that she could bury him where they were going to live together in the future. Yeah, you know how I said I was crying earlier? That continued here. This episode just does not pull any punches. It does its best to make you feel heartbroken for Wanda and for Vision, and it really works. Well, at least on me. Being unable to handle the emotions of everything that's happened with Vision and not being able to bury him at the place she wanted, Wanda has a full breakdown, and in doing so gives us the final, conclusive answer as to who created the Hex. It wasn't Agatha Harkness, it was in fact just Wanda herself. It almost all seems accidental, but during the breakdown she puts the house together out of nothing, she expands the Hex across all of Westview and brings everybody into the 50s sitcom, connecting perfectly to where the series began in the first episode. But just putting everybody into the 50s wasn't quite enough, because while all of this is happening, Vision is formed seemingly out of her powers. powers. And so we realise that this Vision, who's been in every episode of WandaVision thus far, is not the same one that was born during Age of Ultron, nor the one that died at the hands of Thanos. He's just been fabricated by Wanda as a Vision to live in this idyllic suburban life that she wanted for the two of them, in the exact same way that she created Billy and Tommy. We're then brought back into the events of the episode as Agatha claps from afar at everything that she's just witnessed through this flashback, before vanishing in front of Wanda's eyes, swiftly followed by Wanda now hearing Billy and Tommy crying out for help. She follows the calls outside onto the street to find Agatha flying in a far more witch-style get-up, holding them hostage, leaving Wanda to face off against her. We don't see them actually fight because the episode ends with Agatha saying to Wanda that the creation of the Hex as well as Vision, Billy and Tommy all stem from chaos magic, and that makes Wanda the Scarlet Witch. For the first time in the MCU, Wanda Maximoff has been given her official superhero name. That's something we've all been waiting for a very long time, and it did not disappoint. I am so glad that Wanda finally has her alias. But unfortunately, that's also the point where the episode comes to an end. Okay, I'm kidding. There's a mid-credit scene. Let's talk about that too. Because remember in episode 7 where Tyler was talking about his grand plan to save Westview and get rid of Wanda? They reveal the plan to be bringing Vision back to life. All they needed was access to some of Wanda's magic, which was still present on the missile that was fired at her during episode 5 of the show. And the scene ends with Vision coming back online, completely white and fully repaired, setting us up for a face-off between two Visions in the final episode. But that rounds off our breakdown of episode 8 of WandaVision. To me, this episode probably has the least to talk about, but that's not a bad thing. It's only really because they spent a lot of the time giving Wanda the backstory she so desperately needed, setting up how the Hex was created, Wanda getting her alias. But that does not mean that this wasn't a fantastic episode. In fact, it probably is my favourite one of the show, purely because Wanda has finally got a solid backstory beyond a conversation with Ultron, where we get to see all of the key events that brought her up to this show and help make her into the character that she is today. I'm not saying she didn't get a lot of screen time in the films, although that could be true to an extent, but the point being this show has given her and Vision so much more time to develop, and now also given us Wanda's complete chronological character origins. So before I give my thoughts on the episode, I've got a few small things I want to talk about in the way of theories, but to be honest, I've got far less to say this time in the way of theories. First off, I'm expecting episode 9 to have some kind of double Vision face-off. We know from episode 7 that Vision is on his way right now to get to Wanda, to be with her and the children, and we now know that Sword has brought the original Vision back to life as a white Vision, and he is going to be coming into Westview as well, presumably immediately too. So I'm expecting a big face-off between two different Visions, and a hell of a lot of emotional reaction from Wanda when she realizes that the real Vision has been brought back online. Just like last episode, I also want to spend a second talking about Ralph, Agatha's supposed husband. Episode 8 gave us absolutely nothing as towards Agatha's husband, and to be completely honest, I'm actually starting to doubt that he even exists. I'm actually thinking now more that maybe Agatha made up the character just so she could blend in more with the other sitcom characters, when really there's no husband. Agatha is a lone wolf. One of the key theories was that Ralph could be Mephisto, and to be honest, at this point, I do not think Mephisto is going to show up. It's a similar situation to what happened in the lead up to Endgame, where with Avengers Endgame, theory starts to go around suggesting that there would be some new villain introduced in Endgame that would then appear in later films. I was completely against that theory, and I'm so glad it didn't happen, because at the end of the day, you didn't want to start adding someone in the last hours to try and be like, oh, new villain, get ready to be scared. Let that story have its conclusion and then move on. At this point now, it is way too late in the day to introduce Mephisto. If they were going to do it, they should have done it this episode at the very latest, if not earlier, like they did with Agatha. There is more than enough to juggle already in this last episode of the show, and they don't need to add anything more into that mix. So I'm now predicting and hoping, to be honest, that Ralph isn't real. The only exception I'd make is perhaps Ralph could be someone that's teased in the end credits of WandaVision. That, oh, maybe she was actually being serious and she did have a husband, but you're not ready to find out about him just yet. I'd also like to spend a minute just talking about Monica and Pietro. As I said earlier in the episode, we now know Pietro is being controlled by Agatha, but they didn't explain where Pietro came from, and as I said earlier, I still am not entirely sure as to his origins. I do think it might still be possible that a multiverse angle is going to play into this show, because as we know, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is going to follow on directly from this show. It would be weird if the multiverse didn't tie into it in at least a small way. So whether I'm completely right here or as far away from accurate as possible, I'm going to stick with my guns and say that I do believe Pietro is from the X-Men films, but just being controlled by Agatha. I could be wrong, but I really don't know. And as for Monica, I'm hoping that she'll be broken out quite early in the next episode, because she's obviously going to be in some kind of confinement, and now that she's got these powers, I want to see her get out of that confinement and actually play a key part in the final inverted commas battle, or whatever happens in this last episode. And finally, I'd like to make one more comment, not really a theory, because there's not much more to say about it than what I said last episode, but there is still this shock cameo yet to come. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany have said before that there will be someone coming into this show as a cameo that will generate the same amount or more hype that Luke Skywalker brought at the end of Mandalorian's second season. Oh, spoilers for The Mandalorian, I guess. But yeah, I'm still riding on Doctor Strange being the cameo. I just think it's gonna be him. We'll just have to wait until the finale. But speaking of, that brings an end to this video. So as always, let's conclude it with my review for this episode. As I said, a fantastic backstory. Wanda finally gets her name. Vision is alive, hopefully gonna be brought back to the way he was before after this final episode. There is plenty to get excited about in the WandaVision season finale, so I'm gonna give episode 8 of WandaVision a solid and clear 10 out of 10. But that brings an end to this video. So as always, if you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up to let me know you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the Cosmic Vortex, then please consider doing so. And thank you very much to the 100+ subs. But I will see you all next week with a brand new video covering the season finale of WandaVision Season 1. Until then, look after yourselves, stay safe, and thanks for watching the Cosmic Vortex.